About community well. So we're going to be talking about community well-being, mindset, and frameworks. And in relation to the other two sessions that are happening, where there's focusing on specific audiences such as youth and social inclusion, or looking at aging well with our older adults, this really looks at everybody in all cases, because oftentimes we'll find ourselves as practitioners just going, look, I'm stuck. And my favorite mentors, teachers, and leaders have been very helpful in giving me tools that can look like great questions to ask throughout the process that help us either reframe, shift our perspective, or help us to get a better sense of the challenges that we're facing in reality versus the stories that we're telling ourselves as we are proceeding down our journey, or up our journey, or sideways. Okay. So with that in mind, let's head on through. I'll start with a quick introduction, a few definitions. We'll talk about some different scenarios. And as I was saying with Tyson earlier, if you have questions, please feel free to put your hand up, speak up, unmute yourself. We've got a great small group here, which is fabulous for us to work through. Oh, I guess 18, 19, not so small. So maybe the hand up would probably be ideal, but otherwise, if you feel like you need to say something and now is the time, that's okay too. All right. I'm all for passionate discourse. So for myself, I started volunteering here in Calgary in the late 90s when we moved here in about the mid 90s. I've worked in local organizations and groups from a very early age. I was part of a competitive choral group in my like at the age of 16. So that's where I got to meet different local radio stations and different community groups, working with a very large program within a high school and figuring out how a choral program in a school could impact the community on multiple levels. I've supported most Calgary film-focused nonprofits between 2000 and 2018, including being the first paid staff member for particular organizations. I've engaged in international conversations through my roles as Vice President South for Women in Film and Television International, as well as the International Association of Business Communicators, the Human Resources District, or the Human Resources Development Council for Canada. And then, of course, even most recently, looking at writing papers, policy papers. How are we telling meaningful conversations that are mobilizing community to make those changes? I've been producers, organizers, coordinators over the last few years, really, or I mean, the last 20 years. And so over the last little while, up to 15 festivals, markets, events, and galas in a year. So what is community? Well, really, we're breaking this down by our social group of any size whose members reside in a specific locality, share government, and often have a common cultural and historical heritage. Or it could be a locality inhabited by such a group. It could be a social, religious, occupational, or other group sharing common characteristics or interests, and perceived or perceiving itself as distinct in some respect from the larger society within which it exists. So this is really helpful for us to get a sense of three very different mindsets and approaches when it comes to community. When we think about placemaking, this is how we work within community-based participation. And so more than just promoting better urban design, placemaking facilitates creative patterns of use, paying particular attention to the physical, cultural, and social identities that define a place and support its ongoing evolution. And really, it results in the creation of quality public spaces that can contribute to people's health, happiness, and overall well-being. So, some of the tough conversations, as we've actually already alluded to in the first couple of slides here, are that these tough conversations have to happen internally first as they relate to our preconceptions and fears. Others are externally focused, situational, taking place within our communities and organization. So we're going to go through a few different scenarios that are going to help us look at some of these attitudes, mindsets, and some of the different frameworks that are going to be part of every journey as a universal storyline for process and progress. So the scenarios range from straightforward and complex to the complex, and depends on where you are in your particular journey. Ideally, these questions are remaining prudent and time-saving wherever you are. So now, where to start is a common conversation. And what's interesting is that earlier this year, I was presenting at a conference of these amazing professionals who had spent well over a decade already working in community development. And yet they still show up going, I don't know where to start. And sometimes that's just because you're in the middle of a really big question or challenge in the middle of a project. Sometimes you really are starting from scratch, and it's so I like to say, let's start with our own frustration. Get a little bit selfish and figure out what your problem is and your stance in relation to that problem. Because asking those questions of why are you upset? What would make you feel less so can actually give you grand insights into your process. One of my favorite things working with coaching clients is they'll say, oh, I need to do this, this, and this, and this. And I'm like, okay, sounds like you're telling yourself a story that you need to go through a particular process in order to achieve a goal. Now, is that true? Right? Is there another way that you could achieve that goal? Is there another way of looking at this entire protocol as the process being the place of real enjoyment and learning? Or is there this result that needs to happen? So that breaking it down a little bit helps us to then go, okay, well, who does it affect? Right? Because ultimately we're saying we're going to get a little selfish. And honestly, one of the best reasons why we want to get a little bit selfish at the beginning is when you are having a very tough day and you're not sure you want to do the work, and you show up to community and you're not sure you're in the right headspace, and you see somebody benefiting from that little thing that would drive you crazy, that you've stopped. And you're like, oh, the world is a better place because of the time I'm spending here. It's about giving yourself breadcrumbs through the process that are going to feed you specifically in a way that improves your well-being, your sense and appreciation for community, and for the work that you're finding yourself in. Does this make sense to everybody? Am I jumping in and just kind of going all over the place? Seeing some nods. This is good. Okay. Yeah, because ultimately, once we have an awareness of our experience, right, it helps us to outline what we're willing to address. And then we can identify the other players in our community. If I look at this from the case of, let's say, for example, a marketing question, sometimes that selfishness can be a place to start that keeps you motivated. Yeah, absolutely. Yes, 100%. And the funny thing is that that selfishness is something that is a universal experience and multiple people share it. And then somebody comes up to you and says, oh my gosh, thank you for doing that. And you're like, oh, okay, all right, right? Like this is validating your own experience along that path. So if we're taking a look at saying we're having a marketing challenge and we say, oh, you know what, I need to have an account on Facebook and Twitter and all of these other things, and you've got like one volunteer. Is that volunteer going to do more help creating a content strategy for you or supporting you in being able to actually manage your grant applications for the proper support that you need, right? Or even just a communication strategy of emailing different partners so that they're kept updated on what's happening from a day-to-day basis, that or is as you need to in that particular project. The point is that if you have a better understanding of who you are, why you're upset about the problem, what you're doing about that problem, you have a much better understanding of how you want to spend your time and energy. All right, where to search? This is a great question, right? I like to say you can start on Google, and yet a lot of people will get stuck on Google because they will put a one-word question like climate change. And yet Google is a much more helpful resource when you say, how is climate change affecting the food resources in Calgary over the last 10 years? All of a sudden, you have a much more meaningful causal relationship that can support you in your conversation than climate change. All right. And I say this because we do tell ourselves that we're doing a great job of searching. However, we forget about the process of searching, which is resources can be plentiful if you know where to look. So if we go to Google and we say, this is and use full sentences, right? Here is my 10-word sentence that is focused on the thesis behind my project. And then you're able to find out, oh man, there's these other organizations that work in this. Beautiful. Reach out to those administrators. Reach out to those points of contact on the websites to say, hey, where are you finding meaningful data when we're having this conversation? Right? It's a place to start, but getting on the phone, sending those emails, walking in during open office hours is really going to help you develop the relationships to know where to search. And when we're talking about community well-being, you better believe that you think you have a beautiful idea on how to improve the mental health of your community, and yet you get completely frustrated and stuck when you can't figure out what title or what level of management or leadership you need to talk to in order to make meaningful change, right? So this really is a sense of leading towards who can help me. So there's resource pages on websites, staff that work as gatekeepers, events to support ongoing projects. This is why I love signing up for newsletters on software that I have a hard time with, or signing up for newsletters from thought leaders on particular aspects of a conversation that I haven't wrapped my head around. Feed me that data on a weekly basis. I'll gather bits and pieces through osmosis when I have time to look at those newsletters. And all of a sudden, I'm much more confident because I feel more competent with the information to figure out who's involved and to sign up for those free events or those workshops and webinars. So Tyson says, building the relationships are usually the only North Star that direct us to where to start or build synergy. Oh, isn't that the truth, Tyson? Thank you so much. Like when we get frustrated and say, you know, we want it to be a causal relationship. I do this work, this is my result. And yet we know it's the people that we know. It comes down to those relationships that are going to actually get you that seat at the table where you're able to have that meaningful conversation. Now, I do want to highlight this beautiful little image here because I want to reinforce that you deserve support. All right. It should be positive. It could be communicative. Ideally, it could be super. The person you're working with, you should be able to believe their competency with the subject matter, with the resources and that innovation, the curiosity. Hey, I want to hear more about why you think this changes here, or I want to hear more about your experience in working with this. You want them to be accurate, and ultimately you want them to be effective. I remember a conversation with a social worker who was helping me through a tough time. She said, "I'm sorry, I'm not one of the nice ones." I said, "I don't need nice, I need help." I need someone to tell me what to say, when to say it, so that I get the help that I need and I can stop being re-traumatized by this process, right? So let's fight for our right to get the support we need. Sound good? All right, now let's look at the community and board development, because oftentimes we can work within an individual capacity or within a group of individuals. So once we have a sense of the facts, the resources, objectives, we can start to identify what we need to address them. Now, this is where it's interesting because it could be skills, personalities, or approaches, and an appropriate combination of the three can make the right impact. I had the great experience, maybe not so great experience of going from a small city or a small town to a large city to a small town. And I tell you, when you're working with a town of 3,500 people, you better believe there's the mayor and the community leaders, and then there are the people that run the town that have no space whatsoever in those offices. And so understanding that groups of individuals will have certain, this also helps from my marketing background or even just filmmaking and script writing. There's always a group of personalities, right? There's the busybodies. There's the person that cares too much about one thing. There's the person that wants to really make some changes happen, but will never actually say that they want to do so, right? But they'll talk to everybody else about it to influence people in their awareness. So ultimately what I'm hoping to do here is give you some sparks of insight into knowing that maybe somebody that you're dealing with that's a little frustrating could be leveraged into a personality that helps you figure out an approach that you might not consider, right? We work best with diverse opinions and diverse groups. And if everybody has the same idea or thought around an approach, yes, you can streamline that, but that isn't going to help you when you fail a particular community because you didn't even consider it, right? And so that's why I'd like to challenge us when we have a frustration moment. What is our relationship to that frustration? Let's focus on being able to engage and activate those positive solutions and forward movement with what we do share around values, rather than getting caught up in how we think it's supposed to go. All right. Now, communities and groups are often less formalized in structure, consisting of individuals such as your neighbors, family members, or members of an ethno-cultural community. All right, so let's make sure. Perfect. Okay, so some of the questions to ask ourselves when we're working with communities and groups. Is there a purpose that we're gathering, or is this a celebration? Now, if we look at the POP model, right, which is purpose, outcomes, and process, right? We want to focus on what those pieces are. We think, okay, well, actually purpose, or celebration is a little confusing, right? Because a celebration is actually a purpose. Well, the thing is that when you're working with community, you want them to celebrate things, and they are going to be in a mindset of celebrating things. I love when I come up with research to different community partners and they're like, how is this celebratory? And I'm like, well, let me tell you, it's actually research and data gathering. And they're like, what? And I'm like, but it can be celebratory. But I think it's important for us to understand that there's going to be those two different perspectives, right? A festival or a community gathering, say, like we think about the community care pop-up that happens in September in Olympic Plaza. That is a purposeful gathering where people with less access to health resources are able to come together in a socialized environment and being able to celebrate to a certain degree their health and well-being as a community. But ultimately, the purpose is about connecting people that are having a hard time engaging services and resources elsewhere. So when we're thinking about gathering people for a block party in order to support community development and awareness over a potential development project that you're putting together, it is key to understand that your purpose is not necessarily a celebration. To you, it is, totally is, right? Improving community, we're improving the different areas, the sidewalks, the community shared areas. You're going to have a population that goes, but actually, is there a barbecue? Where are the games? How am I going to bring my kids to this? So, working with local community associations, checking in with city resources, and then also checking in with your neighbors. These are great places to start. Some of the personalities that are appropriate for purposes and celebrations are still very much similar across the board when we think about, say, for example, um, uh, we think about a little library. Well, we have the Little Red Reading Van. If you have a block party and you want reading resources, then it's a matter of actually reaching out to the organization and arranging them to be there, figuring out what they need in order to drive the van up, give away books. This is an amazing way to create community and build those layers of meaning, if that makes sense. If we're thinking about something like um, Survivors of Residential School Day, then we're thinking more about awareness, maybe reaching out to the Aboriginal Friendship Center, maybe actually checking to see what's happening already in your community for those events, and then reaching out and saying, hey, would there be space? Because we know that this is a meaningful conversation in relation to this, that we could create space for that purpose outside of a celebration. All right. Making changes. So if your goal is to change your community or neighborhood in a big way, it's good to start with that above piece of, is it purposeful or is it a celebration? And then widening your scope to include related business owners, experts, and contractors to inform the conversation. So what other resources might help you to be proactive? Now, really what happens in this scenario is that you're frustrated because you just don't know where to start in the conversation, right? So we go back to, why were we frustrated? Who are we working with? And how are we engaging these personalities and roles in the conversation? However, if we're looking at something like taking a local, let's think about creating a healthy eating program that works out of the local recreation center, that also taps into Dietitians of Alberta, that also taps into the Alberta health promotional pieces, Communities Choose Well, Alberta Blue Cross, all those kinds of things. So I've said right away, we want to actually have a healthy food program at the arena. So the first thing we need to do is check in at the arena. The next thing we need to do is check in with experts in community development in that area. So that's why I was suggesting the Dietitians of Alberta. You know, you can actually request a free tour of a grocery store with the Dietitians of Alberta, and they can give you a tour of like healthy food and stuff to consider and ways to identify better choices for you and your family and your community. There are different relationships and conversations that we can have from a place of curiosity, right? And that's why I love if we go back to just reaching out and going, hey, what kind of support is there for healthy conversations around food education? All right, organizations and charities. So I didn't even talk about the food bank. I didn't even talk about, like what a great way to help kids understand food security, right? Everybody donating a day or a couple hours of their time on a Saturday to help out at the food bank, right? Or food drives, or even we just were at the East Calgary Community Fair and we had people lined up outside of the Ernie Star Arena because I think it was like 450 because we were giving away free food. There happened to be community resources. There happened to be kids play, and the whole arena was activated. Calgary Parks and Rec was in there. It was amazing. But the food giveaway was such a key piece in A, getting people to the space, B, feeling like there was multiple layers of benefit, and C, being able to say thank you for coming out and supporting your own community in a way that we're able to give you this, like, again, it was fruits, it's vegetables. It was fabulous to be able to give away those kinds of things in the middle of just starting in June. All right. So what kind of data, right? So depending on what you're trying to accomplish, the necessary information can save you hours of phone calls and emails. There are places to obtain relevant research, or it might make sense to create a campaign to collect information. Last year, I just took another workshop with Statistics Canada because the 2001 census data was released. And I wanted to understand the changes from the 2015-16 data, understand how they've obviously in the last 5 years changed infrastructure to support the conversation, what new tools have come out. Well, there's this amazing website now where you can actually do visual maps and compare data between city areas, and actually then take a look at different demographics data to really identify impactful statements based off of statistical data. So that sounds like a lot of work. Luckily, there are helplines. If you've never taken the courses over those months and you happen to not be around for that free resource piece, then you can always call and say, hey, this is the question that I'm dealing with. First thing someone's going to say is, by the way, there's a health index. In fact, you can actually click a tab and every nonprofit charity resource that is around that particular subject is listed all centralized for you. In fact, there's a few different ones, whether that's housing insecurity. There are actually, I'm seeing some curious faces. I was like, I can't say this and not show you. Let's go Statistics Canada. Subjects. All right, here we go. I'm going to put this into the chat for everybody. We have crime and justice, digital economy and society, economic accounts, education, training and learning, prices, price index, older adults and population aging, children and youth. You name it, there is a subject with data on it for you. All right. The other thing is then who are the partners that work to get data? Because as you can imagine, there are large agencies that are going, hey, we're missing this data, or we want to partner with Statistics Canada to better understand how this data is being used for us. So then we can see who's being involved in those different pieces. The other strategy for this is going back to Google. And let's say you find, oh, there's something in the chat here. Hold on a sec. Correct. Absolutely. It can be so empowering to know the scope you're working with, how to resist what's already been happening. It, again, saves you that time and energy, but also totally empowers, motivates you, and inspires you to know where to look. And this is exactly where I was going, right? Looking at the Statistics Canada or that health subject, let's say you see a subject line or a headline that just makes absolute sense to you. Then what you're able to do is search that in Google, see if there's, and even add on Calgary and local charities, and see if there's local organizations that have partnered to talk about that particular subject. Then it's much easier to reach out to those agencies and organizations and go, hey, I know you put out a fabulous paper a couple of years. Like, this is why I work so much with Action Dignity. I'm like, you put out a paper, you put out a paper. Can you tell me more about that research? Can you tell me more about that process? So what is that process? Being familiar with bylaws, voting structures, processes of organizations helps you immensely as you gather people together. Sometimes it only takes two people and a few conversations, while others may, hold on a second here, let me get out of there. Oh my gosh. At the annual general meeting. Could have guessed that. Community infrastructure. So moving beyond resources, what systems are in place to support your work, progress, or objectives? So learning about the structures and information pathways, we have a better chance of achieving our goals in a timely manner. Okay, so up until now, we've been talking about attitudes, perspectives, questions to challenge ourselves with. Let's just refresh ourselves with a bit of infrastructure so we can remind ourselves what the purpose and function of the systems that we have ourselves butting our heads up against every day. So the functions of infrastructure are pretty straightforward in regulating the essential processes, supporting systems, rendering stability throughout the process. So if your infrastructure is somehow missing out on that regulation, that support, and that stability, that's something to take a look at. It's also responsible for the cycling of standardized information between different departments and services. One of my favorite things when we look at mental health is figuring out clinical pathways, referral networks. Oh my gosh, my head was just like, oh my gosh, that makes so much sense. We need to talk to people about research, but we also have to talk about processes. And then understanding that meant that we could get involved with, say, for example, as a foundation, we're partnered with the Gateway Referral Network, which means that recently landed immigrants, newcomers, and refugees are able to be referred to any of our open-minded chats or health events so that they can come in, no questions asked, super easy to walk in off the street and get the infrastructure that they need. The other nice thing is that if I know that they're being referred, I can make sure that I have volunteers that maybe speak the language. We can translate some documents, that kind of thing, right? It helps us build better relationships between that standardized information based off of that pathway, that network that we've become a part of. Maintaining a balance among the various levels in the ecosystem, supporting each level or area of engagement. So when you feel like you are at the level 5, level 17, when it comes to, personnel in a particular, like if we look at Alberta Health Service, it's easy to get overwhelmed, right? Never mind which database you're looking to research the right people, right department, right resource, 211, the distress center, actually, like how many years it took us to reach through to try and understand. Ultimately, the point is that when you get frustrated by multiple levels of management or access, there is a balance in the information that you're working with. A nice positive to focus on when you have 17 steps of personnel is that each one of those is a specialist in the area that they are working, which means that you get to really refine a particular aspect of your project, the work that you're doing, or community, that piece of understanding before moving forward. So let's lean into those frustrations to understand that we're regulating, we're supporting, we've got that stability, we are standardizing that information flow, and now we're looking at balance between process and progress. Now, the nice thing about infrastructure is it does establish pathways and networks to connect relevant areas through functionality. Now, interestingly enough, I see this more importantly as where we need to innovate. Where are the missing pathways? Where could we really use those networks? Where have, just like that fabulous design where, you have the sidewalk around the corner and then the walking path, everybody's just walking across the corner. There are established pathways, so the sidewalks, and then there are the pathways of use, which are all the footpaths that we see everybody taking to the C train and the bus stops, right? And so understanding those formal pathways as well as those informal networks means that you can have options when, say, for example, somebody's not, again, this will happen when you have large organizations, maybe it's been a couple of weeks before someone's gotten back to you. And I say that nicely because oftentimes it can be months, right? 3 months, still haven't heard anything back. They're the only person that looks at this. They're the only department that has that in focus and can have a say-so on it. That's when we lean into those informal networks. That's when we lean into those personalities and approaches, right? We know we won't get the mayor right away, but we could get a mayor's assistant, any of the council members that are focused on those portfolios. We could also attend any informal events where councilors and mayors are going to be present so that you're able to sideswipe them and say, hey, by the way, now I got you in person, I have a question for you. There's another example I like to use for this is I had a frustration around working with a research partner that was a post-secondary institution. And luckily, I happened to be an alumni. And so there was an alumni all access event. I knew the dean was going to be speaking at that event as an introduction because, of course, it's their school. So I showed up and made sure I was there plenty of time in advance for the networking part and made sure that after the end of it, I was able to have that conversation, appreciate what I was there for, but ultimately say, hey, this is something that I'm working on. I can see that it's important to you because of this event. Is there an opportunity for me to send you an email? Because that email I sent months ago obviously didn't get through, or maybe it just wasn't. Again, people get lots of emails. And then the processes and staff, which is really what we're alluding to here, that the people can help you achieve your objectives with a level of competence. And so competence leads us to confidence. If we can show our work, if we can be able to demonstrate a path of success, it's a lot easier to be able to maintain that momentum moving forward. And that's a type of infrastructure in itself. So some of the pieces that we're looking at here, if we're looking at any municipality, we're going to have a combination of static and dynamic components. The static components are unchanging from the municipal framework. So that includes mayors, city council, votings, meetings, communications, data, engagement platforms, policies. All of these are static components. What's constantly changing are the people, the policies, and the programs. So when we're working with communities and groups, we really need to go back to those initial questions of who might be affected by the outcomes as much as who is going to need to be involved in order to move forward. So prohibitive standards, these are things for us to consider, right, when we're looking at impact, potential costs associated with projects, permits, applications. This is why it's great to connect with those experts, those contractors. Let's say we want to look at expanding our neighborhood park to make space for a multi-level use. So let's look at multiple accessibilities, maybe one that's focused on a playground for those with mobility challenges. Boy, oh boy, you better have some conversations with the city, the different planners, the access design standards. You better make sure that you're talking to different, you know what, another organization that's done some good work here is Vivo Center for Healthier Generations. They've done great research and different play hubs around the city. So if you want to test out something around play infrastructure or what games kids are interested in playing, they're a wonderful partner that have had lots of experience to understand those permits, those applications. Funds and reporting. There might be public funds available for your event, celebration, initiative, or project, and if so, congratulations. Be sure to find out what information is due when, the reporting standards, and what kind of tracking your funders require. Development support. So as we know, Calgary CDLI is a centralized space that brings residents, community development practitioners, and supporters together to learn and act on shared issues around community building. Now, the City of Calgary's site, the Engage portal, was established to provide Calgarians with an online space to learn about and participate in city projects and initiatives that are open for public input. Great backing for you if you're thinking about, let's say, for example, you're looking at a capital investment strategy. Well, take a look at the neighborhoods around you to see what they're investing in. All of a sudden you're saying, wow, if we have community programs in all of the jurisdictions that surround us and we're actively developing this, then doesn't it make sense for us to have a hub in order to centralize that work, to minimize duplication, and to help organize in a meaningful way? Right. So that goes back to that bit of awareness, right? Just like the Statistics Canada site, let's look at what's happening in our city from a development perspective. And again, don't be afraid to reach out to the development or permit office and to say, hey, this is something that we're working on. Who else might be working in this area? Now, you could take that one step further, guys, and actually check out the bidding through Canada Buys, right? Canada, the country of Canada is Canada's largest expender. So the country of Canada will spend, what is it, almost like $4.5 billion a year. And that mostly goes to small and medium enterprises, nonprofits, and different partners. If you register as a supplier to the government, you can actually just check out all of the awarded contracts, just like any nonprofit or charity, to see who's won what and where and why and what that's for. So that helps you to better understand from a market research perspective what work you're going to do and how meaningfully you can do it. If we look at the Canadian Placemaking Overview and Action Report, as well as the Community Economic Development, the Project for Public Spaces, these are great places to look at how cities have been designed for people to improve usability and to improve our understanding of proactive development, which is not necessarily preventative policing, but it is a deep relationship too. One of the councils we work with is the CEPTED. So environmental design, no, sorry, CEPTED is, it's the reducing of policing through environmental design. So we actually have a contact with the Canadian Council version as well as the international, because we are just a geek over how we can design amazing environments for well-being that help improve relationships with our local support systems, but also reduce the need for protective and negative responses from those support systems. I tell you, I worked enough with Cowboys Music Festival and Stampede and Ranahans during the height of Stampede. It's great to know why our SWAT teams exist. It's unfortunate that we relegate them to a position where they have to operate in that manner. If we can work more cohesively with those systems so that we can reduce those extremes of behavior and reaction, we can improve the livability of our city for everybody. Interactive food and community asset maps. There's an Alberta food asset map. There is a Calgary-based asset map for development. If you are, yes, thank you, crime prevention through environmental design. It makes so much more sense when you spell it out. 2 minutes left. Okay, well, we tried. I definitely did not keep it to 20 minutes, but let's keep moving. So design to measure up. So when we're proposing projects, we have those regulatory bodies, those authorities. We need to figure out who is our authority and what infrastructure do we go from the funding bodies in order to make sure that that is part of our project protocols. Development know-how. There are many different resources available to facilitate, moderate, and ensure that we're on track. Some of those are going to be, say, for example, the Community Development Unit from the Government of Alberta. Free moderation, free facilitation. We have the Business Link of Alberta, free consultation, free coaching sessions, free market research. Give them 3 weeks and they'll come back with a report for you, right? There are lots of accessible resources available to us so that we don't have to do it all ourselves. And if you're curious, type in Calgary free, whatever you're looking for to see what comes up. So I just mentioned the Business Link of Alberta. All of these links are in the slides as well, so I'll make sure that you guys get a copy of that. Registering with the Calgary Chamber of Volunteer Organizations or Edmonton Chamber of Volunteer Organizations, Integral Org is amazing. They have brilliant toolkits and free clinics to have your organization or your project taken a look at from that legal perspective, from that accountancy financial perspective. Lots of low and no barrier workshops that can really help you move forward. Annually, we have the Board Leadership Calgary Conference. And as I mentioned, the Board Development Programs and Community Development Units through the Government of Alberta. So when we're thinking about our legacy, we are looking at staff, reports, research. So this is something that I like to consider when we're thinking about, let's say we've already been working on this for a while, we want to figure out where to take it to the next level. So how do we learn about the various staff involved in projects that are related to your particular project or objective? Right? So all of a sudden then it's like, well, when was the last time we had this search happen? When was the last time that we were checking to see, because we know this changes every other year, at least if not every 6 months. When was the last time we checked to see who's having these conversations in a meaningful way? And that is a good research break I'd say at least every year. Take a look at some of the conversations you've been having. Take a look at where other conversations are having. Reports, we've talked about this. Where do you find the relevant reports and studies that relate to your work? So we talked about Statistics Canada. We talked about using Google Scholar, working with different breadcrumbs in order to figure out what we need to search for in order to find stuff that's relevant to our work. And then research. Let's not get afraid to contribute to ongoing or experimental research. You know, University of Calgary still has thousands of case studies happening at any given time in any of their research labs. The Mount Royal University, we've partnered with them for their micro internships and being able to create small research projects with different student groups in order to have, 8 students work on something that, again, we hadn't looked at in 2 years. It was a beautiful opportunity for them to gain more understanding in the topic. It was a beautiful opportunity for us to go, what have we been ignoring over the last 2 years, or what's changed that we don't see from our perspective? So it doesn't have to be a big R research. It can be a small R research, but get geeky, get nerdy, and find those people that are just kind of deep diving into those things in the different partnerships or the different institutions. Okay, so we're going to wrap up with these 2 questions, and then I'll just flash through the slides that you guys are going to get afterwards with those resources. Okay, so 2 really great questions to ask ourselves when we are stuck, and I mean the big S, stuck. So who are you serving? A cycle of assessment regularly will allow your programs and strategic vision to stay relevant. And that opportunity to ask, are we working to mobilize a community or motivate a group of people? 5 years into a project, you've been well funded. You know that in order to maintain your funding, you need to have so many people engaging in the process. You are focused on motivating an action rather than mobilizing a community. That's the hard truth about it, right? If we're able to create small experiments and we're able to create different scenarios for innovation, That's where we're able to get the data on what's actually happening beneath that pathway of established economy. Does that make sense? Next up, is it time to start over? So most programs and organizations will find times when things aren't working according to plan. And so we like to ask ourselves, can we deconstruct this and rebuild differently? And in the picture, we have steam, because oftentimes we think I have a fire, someone is watering that fire and it is not going to burn. And yet we have to remind ourselves that without fire, we would not be able to get steam from water. Are we able to look at what we think is putting us down or out as a way to mobilize, inspire, catalyze something else for you as that project and for that collective? Okay. Hey Tyson. Linked resources, they're there. You guys are going to get it. Thank you so much. I'm going to stop.
Thanks, Stacey. Lots of great information.